Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and looked out at the stars that no human had ever seen before. His small fleet of 7 ships moved slowly through space far beyond the edge of known territory. Earth had been sending these quiet exploration missions for 20 years now, always careful to avoid the big alien empires that ruled most of the galaxy. Jake liked it that way because it meant fewer problems and more discoveries. Captain Lisa Hayes called from her ship, the UES Pathfinder. Her voice came through the communication system with excitement that she tried to hide. She had found something big, and Jake could tell from her tone that it was not good news. Lisa was the best scout captain in the Earth fleet, and she never got excited about normal things. When she did get excited, it usually meant trouble was coming their way. Jake told his crew to change course toward Lisa's position. The other ships in his small fleet followed behind him like a line of metal fish swimming through the dark ocean of space. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh sat at his station watching the sensor readings, with the careful attention of someone who had seen too many dangerous situations. Ryan had been with Jake for 5 years and knew how to spot problems before they became disasters. The Defiance moved toward a yellow star that looked almost like Earth's sun. As they got closer, Ryan's sensors began picking up strange energy readings from the 3rd planet in the system. The readings were not natural and they were very strong. Jake ordered all ships to reduce speed and stay hidden behind the large asteroids that floated near the edge of the star system. Captain Lisa Hayes brought her ship closer to the planet while the others waited. Her reconnaissance equipment was the best that Earth had built, and it could see things from very far away without being detected. What she saw made her stomach feel sick. The planet was covered with huge mining operations that stretched across entire continents. Millions of different alien creatures worked in the mines under the hot sun, while guards with energy weapons watched them. Jake received Lisa's report and felt his anger growing. The aliens working in the mines were clearly slaves from many different species. Some looked like giant insects while others resembled earth lizards or birds. All of them moved slowly like creatures who had given up hope long ago. The guards belonged to a species that Jake recognized from Earth's secret intelligence files. They were Calaxians, one of the most powerful and cruel empires in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the largest ship in Jake's fleet, the UES Liberty. She was a woman who had fought in Earth's wars against space pirates and had never backed down from a fight. When she saw Lisa's recordings of the slave camps, her face became very hard. Kate had joined Earth's space forces to protect people, and seeing such cruelty made her want to take action immediately. The Calaxian guards used energy whips on the slaves who moved too slowly. Jake watched through the long-distance cameras as a small alien creature fell down from exhaustion. Instead of helping, a Calaxian guard hit it with his whip until it got up and continued working. Other slaves kept their heads down and pretended not to see what was happening because they knew that helping would only bring punishment to themselves. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh counted 12 Calaxian destroyer ships orbiting the planet. Each ship was about the same size as Jake's Defiance, but they were built for fighting rather than exploration. The Calaxian ships had bright colors and strange decorations that made them look more like parade floats than military vessels. Ryan had studied alien military designs, and he knew that the Calaxians cared more about showing off their power than building efficient warships. Jake's communications officer received a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Kate Sullivan opened the message in her private cabin and read it twice before she understood what Earth's leaders were telling her. The message was simple, but the meaning was complicated. Earth Command wanted detailed information about any alien activities that involved slavery or cruelty to other species. They also wanted to know if the human fleet had been detected by any hostile forces. Kate called Jake to her ship for a private meeting. They met in her conference room where no one else could hear their conversation. Kate told Jake that Earth had been preparing for this kind of situation for many years. The government knew that humans would eventually encounter alien empires that treated other species badly. The question was what to do when that day came. Jake looked at the intelligence reports that Ryan had prepared. The mining operation on the planet was huge, and it had been running for at least 50 years. The Calaxians were taking rare crystals from deep underground and using them to power their war machines. The crystals were so valuable that the Calaxians had built permanent cities around the mines. Thousands of different alien species had been brought to the planet as slaves over the decades. Captain Lisa Hayes sent another report from her hidden position near the planet. She had detected transport ships arriving with new slaves and leaving with loads of crystals. The transport ships were heavily guarded by Calaxian fighters that stayed close to protect their valuable cargo. Lisa estimated that at least 2 million aliens were working as slaves on the planet, and more arrived every day. Jake made his decision. His fleet would stay hidden in the asteroid field while he sent a message to Earth Command requesting instructions. The message would take 3 days to reach Earth and another 3 days for a reply to come back. During that time, they would watch the Calaxian operation and gather as much information as possible without being detected. Admiral Kate Sullivan agreed with Jake's plan, but she also began making preparations for other possibilities. She ordered all ships to check their weapons and shields. She also had her officers study the Calaxian ship designs, so they would be ready if fighting became necessary. Kate had learned during her years in space that peaceful solutions were always better than violent ones. But sometimes violence was the only language that cruel people understood. The human fleet settled into their hiding places among the asteroids and began their long watch. Each day they saw more evidence of Calaxian cruelty, and each day their anger grew stronger. Jake knew that his small fleet could not fight 12 Calaxian destroyers and win, but he also knew that doing nothing while millions suffered was not acceptable to any human with a conscience. Ryan continued monitoring Calaxian communications and learned that the mining operation was considered a minor outpost by the Calaxian Empire. The guards were bored and careless because they had never faced any real threats in this remote star system. That carelessness might be useful if Earth Command decided that action was necessary. The wait began. 6 days passed before Earth Command sent their reply to Admiral Kate Sullivan. The message was longer than she expected, and it contained orders that made her both hopeful and worried. Earth's leaders wanted the fleet to attempt diplomatic contact with the Calaxians to negotiate for the slaves' freedom, but they also warned Kate to keep humanity's true military strength hidden. The message included authorization codes that would unlock certain restricted systems on the human ships if diplomacy failed. Captain Dan Parker commanded the UES Mediator, a ship designed specifically for first contact situations with alien species. Dan had trained for years in alien psychology and diplomatic protocols. His ship carried translation equipment, cultural databases, and special communication systems that could work with almost any known alien technology. Dan was not a warrior like Jake Morrison, but he was brave in his own way because talking to hostile aliens required a different kind of courage. Kate ordered Dan to approach the Calaxian fleet under a flag of truce. The human diplomatic codes were broadcast on all frequencies, along with a simple message requesting peaceful negotiations. Dan's ship moved slowly toward the Calaxian destroyers with its weapons powered down and its shields at minimum strength. The other human ships remained hidden in the asteroid field, but moved closer in case rescue became necessary. Fleet Commander Vex Thule received the human transmission aboard his flagship and laughed so hard that his bridge crew looked at him with confusion. The Calaxians had ruled this part of space for 300 years, and no species had ever dared to challenge their authority. Vex Thule looked at the small human ship on his screens and saw nothing impressive. The ship was plain gray metal without the bright colors and intimidating decorations that marked a vessel belonging to a powerful empire. Dan Parker's translation systems worked perfectly, and he could understand everything the Calaxians said to each other. Vex Thule was discussing the humans with his officers and treating them like an amusing distraction, rather than a serious diplomatic contact. The Calaxian commander seemed to think that humans were another primitive species that could be easily intimidated into leaving the system. The first meeting took place over video communication systems. Dan appeared on Vex Thule's main screen, while the Calaxian commander appeared on the Mediator's bridge display. Vex Thule was a large creature with gray skin and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. His head was shaped like a triangle and his eyes glowed with yellow light. When he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Dan began the conversation by explaining that humans were a peaceful species who had recently become aware of the Calaxian Empire He said that humanity respected the Calaxians as the legitimate rulers of this territory, but requested permission to purchase the freedom of the alien slaves working in the mines. Dan offered payment in rare metals and energy crystals that Earth had gathered from uninhabited worlds. Vexthul listened to Dan's proposal and then began laughing again. The Calaxian commander told Dan that humans were obviously a weak species because they were concerned about the welfare of other aliens. Strong species took what they wanted and did not waste time worrying about creatures that were too weak to defend themselves. Vexthul said that the slaves belonged to the Calaxian Empire and would never be sold to inferior beings like humans. Dan tried a different approach and offered to provide the Calaxians with advanced human technology in exchange for the slaves. He showed holographic displays of human medical equipment that could heal injuries instantly, and human computers that could solve complex problems in seconds. Dan thought that perhaps the Calaxians would be interested in making a trade that benefited both species. Instead of being impressed, Vexthul became suspicious. He wanted to know how a primitive species like humanity had developed such advanced technology. The Calaxian commander began to think that humans might be spies working for one of his empire's enemies. He ordered his ships to surround the mediator and demanded that Dan surrender his vessel for inspection. Captain Lisa Hayes watched from her hidden position as the Calaxian ships moved to surround Dan's ship. She sent urgent messages to Admiral Kate Sullivan warning that the diplomatic mission was about to become a military situation. Lisa could see that the Calaxians were powering up their weapons and preparing to capture the mediator by force. Dan Parker realized that diplomacy was failing, but he continued trying to find a peaceful solution. He told Vexthul that humans were not spies and had no connection to any Calaxian enemies. Dan explained that humanity simply wanted to prevent unnecessary suffering and was willing to pay a fair price for the slaves' freedom. He promised that humans would leave the system immediately after the transaction was completed. Vexthul responded by ordering his fighters to attack a small medical transport ship that was trying to evacuate injured slaves who had managed to escape from the mines. The transport ship was clearly marked with medical symbols and was not armed in any way. Commander Amy Foster watched in horror from the UES Ranger as Calaxian fighters destroyed the defenseless vessel and killed everyone aboard. The attack on the medical ship changed everything. Dan Parker sent an emergency signal to Admiral Kate Sullivan reporting that the Calaxians had committed an unprovoked act of war against a humanitarian vessel. Kate felt her anger burning like fire in her chest as she realized that the Calaxians were not interested in reasonable negotiations. They were creatures who understood only force and cruelty. Vexthul gave Dan an ultimatum. The human fleet must surrender immediately, or he would begin executing captured slaves at a rate of 100 per hour. The Calaxian commander said that humans had insulted the Empire by suggesting that Calaxian property should be sold to inferior species. The only way to restore Calaxian honor was for the humans to become slaves themselves. Admiral Kate Sullivan made her decision. She sent coded messages to all human ships authorizing them to use defensive measures to protect themselves and any civilians in the area. Kate also activated the restricted systems that Earth Command had mentioned in their original orders. Suddenly, the human ships became much more dangerous than they had appeared. Captain Dan Parker received permission to withdraw from his exposed position near the Calaxian fleet. As the mediator began moving back toward the asteroid field, Vexthul ordered his fighters to attack. The Calaxian commander was confident that his superior numbers and firepower would quickly destroy the small human force and provide entertainment for his board crews. The first Calaxian fighter squadron attacked the mediator expecting to disable it with a few quick shots. Instead, they discovered that human defensive systems were much more advanced than they appeared. The mediator's shields absorbed the Calaxian weapons fire without any visible damage, while the ship continued moving at a speed that surprised the attacking fighters. Jake Morrison watched the battle beginning from his position aboard the Defiance. He knew that the fighting would spread quickly and that his small fleet would soon be facing the entire Calaxian force. Jake also knew that Earth Command had given them tools and weapons that no alien species had ever seen before. The time for hiding was over, and the time for showing humanity's true strength was beginning. The Calaxian fighters swarmed around Captain Dan Parker's ship like angry insects attacking a much larger animal. Vexthul watched from his command bridge, expecting to see the human vessel break apart under the concentrated fire of his best pilots. Instead, he saw something that made him question his own sensors. The Mediator was not only surviving the attack, but seemed to be getting stronger as the battle continued. Captain Ben Torres commanded the UES Thunderbolt and decided that Dan needed immediate support. Ben's ship emerged from the asteroid field, moving faster than any Calaxian vessel could match. The Thunderbolt fired precise shots that disabled 3 enemy fighters without destroying them completely. Ben wanted the Calaxians to know that humans could have killed them easily, but chose to show mercy instead. The Calaxian pilots had never encountered an enemy that moved with such coordination and precision. Human ships worked together like parts of a single machine, while Calaxian vessels operated independently according to their commander's individual desires for glory and recognition. Commander Vexthul began to realize that he was facing something very different from the primitive species he had expected to crush easily. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh monitored Calaxian communications from his position aboard Jake Morrison's ship. The enemy pilots were reporting impossible things to their commanders. They claimed that human ships could predict their attack patterns and respond to threats that had not even been made yet. Ryan smiled because he knew the truth about human tactical systems that had been kept secret for decades. Admiral Kate Sullivan authorized the release of humanity's first major tactical advantage. The human ships were connected by quantum communication, links that allowed them to share sensor data and coordinate their movements in real time. When one human ship detected an enemy threat, all human ships knew about it instantly. This gave them the ability to respond to attacks before the Calaxians realized they had been detected. Captain Lisa Hayes brought the Pathfinder into the battle, with her advanced reconnaissance systems fully active. She could track every Calaxian ship and fighter simultaneously while predicting their most likely attack patterns. Lisa shared this information with the other human commanders, giving them an enormous advantage in positioning and timing their responses to enemy actions. Commander Vexthul ordered his heavy cruisers to join the attack. These larger ships carried weapons that could destroy entire cities and had shields strong enough to survive direct hits from asteroid impacts. The Calaxian commander was certain that his cruisers would end the battle quickly and allow him to capture the surviving humans for interrogation. The first Calaxian cruiser fired its main guns at Jake Morrison's Defiance. The weapons were designed to punch through the armor of the strongest alien warships and should have vaporized the smaller human vessel. Instead, the shot struck an energy barrier that appeared around the Defiance and dispersed harmlessly in all directions. Jake's ship had not even been damaged by weapons that could destroy mountains. Captain Ben Torres decided to demonstrate humanity's offensive capabilities. The Thunderbolt targeted the same cruiser that had attacked Jake and fired a single shot from its main cannon. The projectile was not an energy beam like most alien weapons, but a solid metal rod accelerated to incredible speed. The rod punched through the cruiser's shields and armor like they were made of paper and left a perfectly round hole through the entire ship. The damaged Calaxian cruiser began spinning out of control as its internal systems failed. Emergency. Lights flashed across its hull as the crew tried to save their ship from complete destruction. Other Calaxian vessels moved to assist their damaged companion, while trying to understand how such a small human weapon had caused so much damage. Commander Vexthul sent an urgent transmission to Calaxian High Command requesting immediate reinforcements. He reported that his fleet was under attack by an unknown species with military technology that exceeded anything in the Imperial databases. Vexthul also admitted that his forces were losing the battle despite having superior numbers and larger ships. Colonel Sam Mitchell commanded the Marine forces aboard Admiral Kate Sullivan's flagship. When a damaged Calaxian destroyer drifted close to the Liberty, Sam launched boarding pods filled with human soldiers. The Calaxians expected to fight primitives with crude weapons, but instead faced warriors with advanced armor and tactics that no alien species used. Human Marines moved through the Calaxian ship like ghosts that appeared and disappeared without warning. They used non-lethal weapons to disable the enemy crew while gathering intelligence about Calaxian technology and military procedures. The Calaxian soldiers were brave fighters, but they had never faced an enemy that could adapt so quickly to new situations. Captain Rachel Turner commanded the UES Vengeance, a ship that looked identical to the other human vessels, but carried weapons that had been kept secret even from most Earth military commanders. When Vex Thul's flagship moved to attack the Liberty, Rachel decided to show the Calaxians what human engineering could really accomplish. The Vengeance fired a weapon that the Calaxians had never seen before. Instead of a single projectile or energy beam, it released a cloud of microscopic machines that swarmed over the enemy flagship like an invisible plague. The tiny machines ate through the ship's hull and internal systems, while reproducing themselves from the materials they consumed. Vex Thul watched in terror as his flagship began dissolving around him. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but the microscopic invaders passed through solid metal like it was empty space. The Calaxian commander had no defense against an enemy that could not be seen or touched, but could destroy his ship from the inside out. Admiral Kate Sullivan sent a message to all Calaxian ships offering them one final chance to surrender and withdraw from the system. She explained that humanity did not want to destroy the Calaxian fleet, but would do so if necessary to protect the enslaved aliens on the planet below. Kate gave them exactly 10 minutes to make their decision. The surviving Calaxian ships began retreating toward the edge of the star system, while broadcasting distress calls to every Imperial base within communication range. Commander Vex Thul abandoned his dissolving flagship in an escape pod and continued transmitting detailed reports about human capabilities to his superiors. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh intercepted the Calaxian transmissions and translated them for the other human commanders. The enemy messages described human ships as impossibly advanced vessels, crewed by warriors who fought with perfect coordination. The Calaxians also reported that human weapons could destroy their strongest ships with single shots. Jake Morrison realized that the battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Calaxian Empire would not ignore the defeat of one of their fleets, especially by a species they had never heard of before. Earth would need to prepare for a much larger conflict in the very near future. Captain Lisa Hayes detected Calaxian reinforcement fleets already moving toward their position from 3 different directions. The enemy was mobilizing hundreds of ships to crush the human force and restore their empire's reputation for invincibility. Lisa estimated that they had perhaps 1 week before the first enemy reinforcements arrived. Admiral Kate Sullivan called a meeting of all human commanders to discuss their options. They could withdraw immediately and report their discoveries to Earth Command, or they could stay and fight a battle that would announce humanity's presence to the entire galaxy. Kate knew that either choice would change the course of human history forever. Emperor Kalarvek sat on his crystal throne in the center of the Imperial Palace and listened to reports that made no sense to his ancient mind. His war council had gathered in the great chamber where the walls were covered with trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. The assembled admirals and generals spoke in whispers about impossible defeats and mysterious enemies that had appeared from nowhere. Grand Admiral Thex Morin stood before the Emperor and tried to explain what had happened at Zerion System. His voice shook as he described how Commander Vex Thul's fleet had been defeated by 7 small ships, crewed by creatures that called themselves humans. The Grand Admiral insisted that the reports must be exaggerated because no unknown species could possess military technology superior to the Calaxian Empire. The Emperor's 4 eyes blazed with yellow fire as he studied the visual records that Vex Thul had transmitted before his flagship was destroyed. The human ships looked primitive and unremarkable compared to the magnificent vessels of the Imperial fleet. Their gray metal hulls had no decorations or symbols of power, yet somehow these plain ships had defeated 12 Calaxian destroyers and damaged a heavy cruiser. Admiral Zex Kalar stepped forward from his position among the other commanders. He was the Emperor's youngest nephew, and hungry for the glory that would make him worthy of eventual succession to the throne. Zex Kalar had studied the battle records carefully and believed he understood why Vex Thul had failed so badly in what should have been an easy victory. Zex Kalar told the War Council that Vex Thul had been careless and overconfident. The fleet commander had treated the humans like harmless primitives instead of taking proper military precautions. Zex Kalar argued that a properly prepared Calaxian Battlefleet would crush these humans easily and restore the Empire's reputation for invincible power. Emperor Kalarvex considered his nephew's words while looking at the star charts that showed Xerion System's location. The mining operation there produced crystals that powered the Empire's most advanced weapons and could not be abandoned to unknown enemies. More importantly, allowing any species to defeat Calaxian forces without consequences would encourage other subject races to rebel. The Emperor made his decision with the absolute authority that had kept his family in power for 800 years. He ordered the assembly of Battlefleet Primus, the most powerful mobile force in the Imperial Navy. 200 ships would travel to Xerion System under Admiral Zex Kalar's command, with orders to capture or destroy the human forces and make an example that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. Battlefleet Primus included the Empire's newest dreadnoughts, ships so large that they carried their own manufacturing facilities and could operate independently for years. Each dreadnought was armed with weapons capable of cracking planets and defended by shields that could absorb the energy output of entire stars. No enemy force in recorded history had ever survived contact with a complete Imperial battle fleet. Admiral Zex Kalar selected his flagship from among the fleet's most impressive vessels. The Eternal Glory was a kilometer long and decorated with precious metals taken from conquered worlds. Its hull was covered with artistic reliefs showing the Emperor's ancestors defeating their enemies in glorious combat. Zex Kalar believed that commanding such a magnificent ship would guarantee his victory over the primitive humans. Meanwhile, at Xerion System, Admiral Kate Sullivan received reinforcements from Earth that made her smile for the first time in days. Admiral Chris Thompson arrived with 30 ships from the Sol Defense Fleet, while Admiral Nicole Adams brought 25 vessels from the Colonial Protection Force. The human fleet now numbered over 60 ships, but Kate knew they would need more. Captain Greg Wilson commanded the intelligence vessel UES Sentinel, a ship designed to intercept and decode alien communications across vast distances. Greg's sophisticated equipment had been monitoring Calaxian transmissions since the first battle, and he brought disturbing news to the human commander's strategy meeting. Greg reported that the Calaxians were mobilizing their largest battle fleet to attack Xerion System. The enemy force included ships that were 10 times larger than anything in the human fleet and carried weapons that could destroy entire moons. Greg estimated that Battlefleet Primus would arrive in exactly 7 days and would be expecting to face the same small human force that had defeated Vex Thule. Admiral Kate Sullivan called an emergency conference with Earth Command using the quantum communication system that allowed instantaneous contact across any distance. The meeting included President Maria Santos, Defense Minister Robert Clark, and Fleet Admiral Helen Rodriguez, the highest-ranking military officer in Earth's forces. Kate explained the situation to Earth's leaders and requested permission to reveal humanity's true military capabilities. She told them that the Calaxians were sending enough ships to conquer entire star systems, and that her current force could not survive such an overwhelming attack. Kate needed authorization to activate the secret defense protocols that Earth had been developing for exactly this situation. President Santos listened to Kate's report and consulted with her advisors before making a decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. She authorized Kate to access the Shadow Fleet, a collection of ships that had been built in secret shipyards far from Earth and hidden throughout human space for decades. The Shadow Fleet represented humanity's greatest military secret. While Earth had maintained the appearance of a peaceful species interested only in exploration and trade, human engineers and strategists had been preparing for eventual contact with hostile alien civilizations. Hundreds of advanced warships waited in hidden bases throughout human territory, ready to defend Earth and her colonies. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the authorization codes that would summon the Shadow Fleet to Xerion System. She transmitted the activation signals to secret bases in 20 different star systems and waited for confirmation that humanity's hidden defenders were responding to the call. Captain Troy Anderson commanded the UES Dark Star, one of the Shadow Fleet's most advanced vessels. His ship had been waiting in a hidden base near the galactic rim for 15 years, while his crew trained for a war that might never come. When Troy received the activation signal, He felt both excitement and fear because he knew that humanity's long period of peaceful isolation was ending. Commander Helen Pierce brought her ship the UES Nightfall from a base hidden inside an artificial asteroid field. Her crew included some of Earth's most experienced combat veterans who had volunteered to spend years in isolation, preparing for humanity's first major galactic war. Helen had studied alien military tactics for over a decade and was eager to test human capabilities against a real enemy. Admiral Chris Thompson coordinated the arrival of Shadow Fleet units from across human space. The ships appeared at Zarian system in small groups over the course of 3 days, using stealth technology that made them invisible to most sensor systems. By the time the last unit arrived, the human force numbered over 400 vessels. Captain Mark Davis commanded a squadron of assault ships designed specifically for fighting larger enemy vessels. His ships were small and fast, but carried weapons that could penetrate the armor of the biggest alien dreadnoughts. Mark had trained his crews to operate in perfect coordination, allowing them to concentrate their firepower on the most vulnerable points of enemy ships. The human commanders held their final strategy meeting aboard Admiral Kate Sullivan's flagship. They reviewed intelligence reports about Calaxian battle tactics and discussed the best methods for defeating an enemy that outnumbered them in terms of individual ship size and firepower. The humans would need to use superior speed, coordination, and technology to overcome the Calaxians' numerical advantages. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh presented his analysis of the approaching enemy fleet. Battlefleet Primus was organized according to traditional Calaxian military doctrine that emphasized individual ship combat rather than coordinated fleet actions. The enemy commanders would compete with each other for glory and recognition, making it difficult for them to work together effectively. Admiral Kate Sullivan made assignments for the coming battle. Each human ship received specific targets and tactical objectives designed to maximize the confusion and disruption of the enemy fleet. Kate knew that the Calaxians expected to fight a traditional space battle, but humanity would give them something completely different. Admiral Zex Kalar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Glory and watched Zarian system growing larger on his main display screen. Battlefleet Primus had traveled for 7 days through hyperspace and arrived exactly on schedule to crush the human forces that had dared to challenge the Calaxian Empire. Zex Kalar expected to find a few dozen primitive ships hiding among the asteroids like frightened animals. Instead, his sensors detected energy signatures from over 400 vessels distributed throughout the star system. The readings made no sense because the human ships appeared to be using some kind of stealth technology that made them difficult to track accurately. Zex Kalar ordered his fleet to full alert status while demanding explanations from his sensor operators. Commander Dex Velor approached the Admiral with reports that contradicted everything the Calaxians knew about human capabilities. The sensor readings indicated that the enemy fleet was much larger than Battlefleet Primus and included ship designs that did not match any known alien technology. Dex Velor suggested that the humans might have formed an alliance with one of the Empire's major enemies. Admiral Zex Kalar opened a communication channel to all frequencies and demanded to know whose fleet was hiding in his Empire's territory. His voice carried the authority of 8 centuries of Calaxian rule as he ordered the unknown vessels to identify themselves immediately. Zex Kalar expected the response to come from some familiar enemy that had been secretly building forces to challenge Imperial power. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the Calaxian transmission aboard her flagship the Liberty and decided that the time for secrecy was over. She activated the communication systems that would broadcast her response to every ship in both fleets and to monitoring stations throughout this part of the galaxy. Kate wanted everyone to hear humanity's answer to the Calaxian challenge. Kate's voice was calm and clear as it reached Admiral Zex Kalar's bridge. She identified herself as the commander of Earth's first expeditionary fleet and explained that humans had come to Zarian system to liberate the enslaved aliens working in the Calaxian mines. Kate told Zex Kalar that his empire's cruelty toward other species was unacceptable and would no longer be tolerated. Admiral Zex Kalar laughed when he heard Kate's words because he could not believe that any species would be foolish enough to threaten the Calaxian Empire. He told Kate that humans were clearly primitive creatures who did not understand the consequences of challenging superior beings. Zex Kalar offered to accept human surrender if they withdrew immediately, and never returned to Imperial territory. Kate Sullivan's response was brief and final. She told Admiral Zex Kalar that this was humanity, and they answered with might. As soon as Kate finished speaking, the human fleet revealed itself completely by dropping their stealth systems and powering up their weapons. 400 human warships appeared on Calaxian sensors simultaneously, like stars suddenly blazing to life in empty space. Captain Troy Anderson commanded the first attack wave and led 50 fast attack ships in a coordinated strike against the Calaxian fleet's outer defensive screen. The human ships moved in perfect formation while accelerating to speeds that the Calaxians had never seen before. Troy's tactical displays showed him the exact position and status of every enemy vessel as his ships approached their targets. The Calaxian destroyer captains tried to intercept the incoming human ships, but discovered that their opponents could change direction and speed in ways that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Human ships used gravitational manipulation systems that allowed them to make impossible turns while maintaining their acceleration toward enemy targets. Commander Helen Pierce brought her assault squadron against the Calaxian battlecruisers that formed the second line of defense. Her ships were designed to penetrate heavy enemy armor and disable the largest vessels in the opposing fleet. Helen's crews had trained for years to coordinate their attacks perfectly and strike at the most vulnerable points of enemy ships. The first Calaxian battlecruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light as Helen's ships concentrated their fire on its main reactor. The explosion was so powerful that it damaged 2 other enemy vessels and created a debris field that disrupted Calaxian communications. Admiral Zex Kalar watched in horror as one of his most powerful ships was destroyed by enemies he had considered inferior. Captain Mark Davis led his squadron against the Calaxian dreadnoughts that represented the enemy fleet's ultimate weapon. These massive ships were protected by energy shields that could absorb tremendous punishment and armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Mark knew that defeating the dreadnoughts would require tactics that no alien species had ever used before. Mark's ships attacked the dreadnoughts from multiple directions simultaneously, while using electronic warfare systems to disrupt the enemy's targeting computers. The human vessels were too small and fast for the massive Calaxian guns to track effectively, but they carried weapons specifically designed to penetrate the heaviest armor and shields. Admiral Zex Kalar ordered his flagship to target the human command vessel. Believing that destroying Admiral Kate Sullivan would end the battle quickly, the Eternal Glory's main guns fired at the Liberty with enough energy to vaporize a small moon. But the shots struck defensive barriers that appeared around Kate's ship and dispersed harmlessly in all directions. Captain Rachel Turner brought the Vengeance into range of the Eternal Glory and fired the same microscopic weapon system that had destroyed Vex Thul's flagship. The tiny machine swarmed over Zex Kalar's ship and began consuming its hull while reproducing themselves from the materials they encountered. The Admiral watched helplessly as his magnificent vessel began dissolving around him. Colonel Sam Mitchell coordinated boarding actions against damaged Calaxian ships while Captain Lisa Hayes used her reconnaissance systems to track fleeing enemy vessels. The human Marines moved through captured ships with the efficiency of soldiers who had trained for this exact situation, while Lisa made sure that no Calaxian vessel escaped to report detailed information about human capabilities. Emperor Kalar Vex himself arrived at Zirion's system aboard the Imperial flagship Dominator, just as his nephew's fleet was beginning to collapse under the human assault. The Emperor brought the Imperial Guard fleet, 50 of the most advanced ships in the Calaxian Navy, expecting to turn the tide of battle through his personal intervention. Admiral Karen Rodriguez commanded the UES Dominion, a ship that had been built specifically to fight the largest enemy vessels. When Karen detected the Emperor's arrival, she requested permission from Admiral Kate Sullivan to engage the Imperial flagship directly. Kate granted permission and wished Karen good luck in what would become the most important single combat of the battle. The Dominator was the largest and most powerful warship in the Calaxian Empire, armed with weapons that could crack continents, and protected by shields that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. Emperor Kalarvex commanded from his crystal throne, while his best officers operated the ship's advanced systems with deadly precision. Admiral Karen Rodriguez approached the Imperial flagship with her ship's most powerful weapons charged and ready. The Dominion fired a single shot from its experimental antimatter cannon, a weapon that had been developed in Earth's most secret research facilities. The shot penetrated the Dominator's shields and armor like they were made of paper and disabled the massive ship's main systems. Emperor Kalarvex found himself aboard a powerless vessel, drifting helplessly through space, while his empire's greatest fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had never heard of a week earlier. The Emperor activated his personal communication system and transmitted his unconditional surrender to Admiral Kate Sullivan. Kate accepted the Calaxian surrender and ordered her fleet to cease firing. She established communication with the enslaved aliens on the planet below and coordinated their evacuation to safety. Human transport ships began landing on Xerion to collect the liberated aliens, while medical teams provided treatment for those who had been injured by their captors. The news of humanity's victory spread throughout the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The liberated aliens carried stories of human intervention to their homeworlds, inspiring other oppressed species to hope for freedom. Within days, rebellions began breaking out across the Calaxian Empire as subject races rose up against their oppressors. Admiral Kate Sullivan prepared her final report to Earth Command while looking out at the stars that now knew humanity existed. She wrote that when the Empire officials asked whose fleet challenged their authority, humanity had answered definitively with overwhelming might. The human species had announced their presence to the galaxy and established themselves as protectors of those who could not protect themselves. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance and realized that his exploration mission had started a war that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity was no longer a hidden species watching from the shadows, but a major power that would influence the fate of billions of intelligent beings. Jake wondered if Earth was truly ready for the responsibilities that came with such power.